All right, thanks everyone for joining. As I said, we have Kareem here. He's going to be talking about some nice therapeutics for long COVID that they're working on with this company, which I'll get into right before I introduce him. But I figure I'll start with the updates. The bunch of papers, as we know, the newest paper that a lot of you already heard a couple of weeks ago came out with our finally after our long haul with getting a about a year, I think it took it for it to come out. But so now it's been getting a lot of press and a lot of nice attention that it deserves. So um, so stay tuned for the next papers. So and also I'm bringing this up because we're trying to organize a meeting with me and Paco and some other people trying to help us out for next year, summer 2024 in Lisbon. But the title is Infectious Diseases to Space Travel and how all kind of regulatory RNAs might be involved. So if anyone knows any sponsors that'd be willing to help out, let us know. We're talking to a few people, so I'm going to reach out to more. But this is kind of a rough agenda. If anyone wants to help organize, let us know. Um, all right, so let's just jump into the news. Some recent COVID news that you might be aware of is this new variant BA.2.86. Luckily, right now it's relatively low. There's a new Eric Toppel's blog, which I like to read. He does a good job of usually providing updates and various things. And this yesterday he provided a nice quick update about this variant. Right now, the other variant is EG.5 and the XBB variants, but this one is of concern because if it does actually take over because of all these mutations, as you can see, that's here. If there's a concern that it could potentially have lots of potential for immune escape to happen, and then the immune response would be difficult to organize, as he summarizes here in this article. But to date, there's not that many cases, but the people are trying to figure out where it's going to go. So, as he characterizes it, what we know now, the various BA.286 lineages in the different countries are not even close. So, one theory people are thinking is that it's trying to basically stabilize to a variant that might be dominating over others. So as you see here is the different lineages. This is from the different countries. So right now, some people are saying, okay, this no need to panic. Now it's not going to be the dreaded next Omicron event, as Eric Topol describes his thing. But due to this, hyper mutated new variant states, that it could quickly spread through the world, and it could be some people say it could be an Omicron squared event. But the good thing right now is that, there's no indication that potentially it could cause a lot more impact until we see it growing. And due to its maybe the natural immunity that people have and the vaccines, it potentially could not, it won't spread like people are saying. But it's something to keep an eye on. Because right now the current variants that dominate EG.5.1 and this FL.1.5.1, which I'll show you that more likely this might be outgrowing EG soon, and has a waning immunity. Again, this one, but not as bad as the mutations that we see in this variant here. But that's just something to keep an eye on. That potentially some predictions people are making, this new variant popping up, it might in the next month or two be taken over because due to all these different mutations that you see in the spike in other regions, that is very unique to this one. And you can see how the virus just keeps evolving. So as Eric Topol puts it, it's like, facing the fact the virus is with us in one version or another for many years to come, and rather than denying it, it's better to keep an eye on it and be cautious. So that leads to some of the news articles that you're saying is, maybe people should be putting on their masks again. As some of the experts are saying, I still wear my mask most places indoors and flying, but that's probably minority. But they're saying due to the spread of the EG.5.1 is basically on that, and FL.1.5.1 are the ones that are right now spreading. But even if this one going to be spreading, that's a concern. So this leads to the boosters too. So the boosters, people are saying if you want to get your booster, the new booster that will have the XBB vaccine against that in there, the cocktail. It's supposed to be released mid-September, maybe beginning of October. People are saying. So that's so you can keep an eye on that. Right now they're saying 17% of the population has been updated with that, but more should hopefully follow. probably get that every 6 months. New paper came out looking at COVID-19 maybe triggering new onset with high blood pressure. Uh, this is a hypertension paper, and this is like the summary of it. I'm going to go through this quick just to give Kareem enough time to talk, but this is paper that people maybe should pay attention to. Some long COVID news. If you missed it a couple of weeks after our paper came out, Eric Topol put a nice blog and a nice plug for our paper, but he did a really nice job summarizing it. This is one quote from him summarizing the relationship, and then he brought it back to long COVID, how it could be related to long COVID. So if people are interested in reading his summary of our paper, go here. Then there's a couple of other papers that have come out on long COVID that he summarizes in his blog. Which one is here, this big, large study looking at 2 years post-sequela of COVID-19, the long COVID two-year cases. This was a large study by Ziad Ali. And what they looked at basically, 2 years after the case they got infected, about 140,000 people, compared it to, with almost 6 million people non-infected, and it had basically a large cohort of people that are looking into long COVID cases. And long story short for this, they did some pretty neat analysis to figure out potential long COVID hospitalization, non-hospitalized, hospitalized, and overall over the 2 years what happened. And indeed, what they show, yes, people could experience long COVID for 2 years, as we all know. And some of the major findings here was that that in non-hospitalized group, about 30% of them of the 80 sequela, including GI, this is the sequela that had it. There's a bigger figure in the paper that had about 80 different characterizations for long COVID. This is just the more dominant ones. But so you can go in the paper, look at all the details for that. But out of the 80 different categories for long COVID that they came up with in the groups for 2 years, they said that 30% of them for lasting for 2 years would be the dominant ones are GI neurological long COVID impact, which might not be too surprising for the people here that know the work. And so, as Eric points out here, the question is how long. The only thing is, the only reassuring thing is that for non-hospitalized people from this big, large study, which the previous studies have also alluded to this, that that about 2 years on, that people actually might reside from the long COVID cases, so that's good. But there still remains lists in multiple organ systems for a lot of people who have long COVID to remain even after 2 years, even if it's not a major impact in their life after 2 years. But it's about one caveat that in this work is that the population they looked at was about 90% men, and we know more females are impacted than men for long COVID. So it's not exactly the equal distribution of population that represents people who have long COVID. So, and also was 61 years and older. So we know the long COVID, as he points out here, is that females are more dominant getting long COVID, but then the 30 to 40 age groups. So that's something that keep in mind when you're reading this. It doesn't actually, and also since it's 2 years past, it's the earlier strains, doesn't include Delta and Omicron for this. So these are the things to keep in mind reading this. Needless to say, it's still a good paper. And there's another paper that he went over looking at a veteran population. Again, another 2-year kind of cohort analysis. Basically, the summary of it. And again, this other paper agrees that yes, long COVID conditions can last for 2 years or more. And one thing that they talk about in here, this was a population of 208,000 veterans, and they looked at 8.7% of the veterans who had mortality was more than double than the death rates within the months, about 6 to 8 months after being diagnosed with COVID. And the highest risk patients suffered, as might not be so surprising, that's earlier in the earlier periods. But as Eric Topol summarizes these papers here, this is a summary from all this, is that, and then he refers back to this blog that he would talk about in our paper. Basically 2 years, we know that now multiple papers have come out, including these new ones. The burden of symptoms of multi-organs is important to keep in mind. And we really don't have anything to show how to cure this and stuff, which will lead to Kareem talking about his therapeutics. So that might be a plus. And Eric alluded, now we know there's no valid treatments. That was his big miss part, but maybe mitochondrial treatments might be something to help someone, but that's we need more work to do that, obviously. But then this is thing that that we're going to need a lot more work to, and this is going to be something that's going to be with us for a long time, as most of you know. And one other long COVID paper was talking about looking at patients who might not have been diagnosed with COVID, so maybe they're asymptomatic or they just didn't test positive, and then relating it back to PVS, means post-viral syndrome, meaning COVID related. And then they also had a category of long COVID patients who were neurological symptoms, so neuropaths. And in this paper, it's a small cohort of patients they looked at, and they related back to some inflammatory markers too. But the basic overall story take-home message of this is that the post-viral syndrome, people had increased inflammation happening, and plus also some of the people who had basically this symptom that you could have long COVID and not know it because you never tested positive for COVID. That was the basis of this. So this is another whole other concern. You can read the paper for the details, but it's a whole other concern saying there's probably a population of people walking around never knowing they had COVID, but they have long COVID symptoms, and that's even harder to diagnose because they wouldn't have even thought they would have long COVID symptoms. But so this is the basic take-home message of this paper, which is concerning. What they did in this paper too, what they looked at the patients who didn't know they had COVID, is they looked at their antibody and T cell response and their recognition for the virus components like S region and all that, to figure out if they actually were infected at one point in time with COVID. And then there's this other paper, maybe the inflammation group might want to pay attention to, that came out. I think Rob Schwartz is one of the authors for this, for my group. But they looked at long COVID, they looked at epigenetic memory of the coronavirus. Basically what they looked at is this NIH article did a nice job summarizing it. But what they looked at is basically monocytes they took from patients, and they actually isolated this rare stem cell from them, which now they have developed this interesting technique where you could extract these stem cells, and you don't have to get it from the bone marrow, so less a bit invasive. But the basic take-home message is they looked at the population of these cells and the stem cells, and which would lead to basically the monocyte development. And they realized that there's a key factor from the monocytes being produced to actually maybe have these key epigenetic changes, which they correlate back to IL-6 being one of the big contributors to this reprogramming of these myeloid cells, or the mature progeny of them being the monocytes. And this potentially can lead to this big cytokine storm and everything else that what you people see in the brain and the lung. So this is an interesting paper that they did a lot of work in this. I didn't put it to justice, but I put the brief summaries so I could get the Kareem. But it's something people might want to read. I'm going to just quickly go to the BioBot data to look at the waste surveillance data. You can see that the cases are rising, still rising. But depending on your region, this is where I live in the Middlesex County, and Kareem also is probably there. So we see that our cases did go up in the wastewater, but then it's starting to go back down. So take a look at the wastewater. Depending on your region, things are still going up. Some places might see this little dip, so it might be a positive sign. And as we said earlier, it's EG.5 is the dominant one, but these other, that's sort of like a variant soup here now. But this VL.1.5 is becoming dominant. That BA 2.78 or 68 still isn't here. As we said, it's lower cases, but people are predicting maybe this might be something that will take over the next month or two. And now CDC has provided them the nice little tree here, phylogenetic tree, to look at the similarities between the different variants if you're interested to see where these ones are connected to. And overall, hospital admissions are actually going up in the United States, and this is one of the few countries that actually keep track of this on this site, to ourworld.data, to report. But that's it in a nutshell. I'll share the slides with you, but I wanted to